Have you ever wondered what truly draws a woman in? Not just what catches her eye, but what captures her soul. See, most people think desire is about appearance, the body, the smile, the status. But the truth is far more mysterious and far more powerful. What actually turns a woman on has less to do with what she sees and more to do with what she feels. It's in the subtle energy you carry when you walk into a room. The quiet confidence that doesn't scream for attention, but naturally commands it. It's the way you make her feel seen, not as a conquest, but as a universe waiting to be understood. Science calls it emotional attunement, that invisible chemistry between two people when safety meets excitement, when curiosity meets trust. It's not about perfection. It's about presence. Because a woman doesn't fall for what you show, she falls for what you evoke. And when you understand the language of that desire, you realize it's not about chasing women. It's about becoming the kind of energy they can't help but be drawn to. Starting with emotional curiosity means stepping beyond the surface of what we think we know about attraction. It's about awakening a deeper sense of wonder in the listener, the kind that makes them pause and question their own beliefs. When we talk about what turns women on, most minds immediately rush to the obvious appearance, status, charm, or physical chemistry. But emotional curiosity challenges that limited view. It invites people to ask, is desire really that simple? Or is there something more intricate, more human at play here? That question, that pause, is where true understanding begins. Emotional curiosity sets the tone for connection. It pulls the audience out of the habitual mindset that attraction is purely visual or biological and leads them into a space of emotional awareness. It's not about facts or theories alone, but about the emotional world that shapes how people experience desire. When you open a speech with this type of curiosity, you're not giving answers, you're opening doors. You're inviting the listener to explore not just what attracts women, but why it attracts them, and how much of that attraction happens beneath conscious awareness. The key here is not to instruct, but to provoke thought. When the audience hears a question that stirs something personal, like, what if what draws a woman in has nothing to do with looks and everything to do with energy? They begin to engage not as passive listeners, but as emotional participants. They start searching within themselves for moments, experiences, and connections that fit this new idea. That's how curiosity becomes a tool for transformation. It shifts the focus from knowing to feeling. In a subject like female desire, emotional curiosity becomes essential because it removes the judgment that often clouds these discussions. Instead of reducing attraction to stereotypes, it humanizes it. It recognizes that women, like men, respond to emotional and psychological depth, to signals of safety, confidence, and authenticity. When the audience is guided to explore this through curiosity, it creates empathy and openness. They stop thinking in terms of manipulation or technique and start seeing desire as a living, breathing emotional dance between two people. That's why emotional curiosity is the heartbeat of any talk about attraction. It allows the speaker to reach beyond intellect and into experience, turning the speech from an explanation into a revelation. By challenging assumptions with sincerity and calm authority, it builds anticipation and readiness in the listener to hear the deeper truths that follow, truths that feel less like advice and more like awakening. Blending science with soul means bringing together the clarity of knowledge and the depth of human feeling. It's about understanding that desire isn't just a chemical reaction in the brain, nor is it only a poetic emotion that lives in the heart. It's both. When a speaker weaves scientific insight with emotional truth, the message becomes whole. Science gives it credibility while emotion gives it life. One without the other feels incomplete. If you only focus on the science, you risk sounding clinical and detached. If you only focus on the emotion, the message can feel vague or sentimental. But when the two meet, something powerful happens. Feel what they're learning. Desire, especially female desire, is a perfect example of where science and soul must coexist. Biologically, attraction involves hormones, neurotransmitters, and psychological triggers. Dopamine for pleasure, oxytocin for bonding, serotonin for emotional stability. But those are just the visible waves of a much deeper current. The emotional and soulful side of attraction speaks in the language of connection, safety, curiosity, and trust. It's in how a woman's nervous system responds to a man's presence, not just his words. When science meets soul, we understand that what seems mysterious is actually deeply human, a mix of instinct and emotion, logic and longing. When this balance is achieved in speech, the audience feels seen and educated at the same time. The science grounds them, it tells their rational mind, this is real. The soul touches them, it tells their heart, this matters. The power of this combination is that it respects both the intellect and the emotion of the listener. It allows people to understand themselves not as mechanical beings reacting to stimuli, but as emotional creatures guided by invisible chemistry that science is only beginning to explain. The speaker's tone plays an essential role here. It must flow like a conversation between the logical and the intuitive, as if reason itself is being softened by empathy. The science provides the structure, the how and why, but the emotion provides the meaning. When the audience feels that fusion, they experience learning not as a lecture, but as awakening. They begin to connect dots between their experiences and what the research says, realizing that desire isn't something you figure out, it's something you feel with understanding. That's the beauty of blending science with soul. It transforms facts into truth and information into transformation. Using a calm, confident, and intimate delivery is what gives a message its emotional gravity. It's not just about what is said, but how it's said. A topic like female desire requires sensitivity and grace. It's not something that can be shouted or rushed through. The tone must feel like a soft mirror, reflective, steady, and open. When a speaker speaks calmly, they create a space where the listener feels safe to receive the message. Confidence adds authority, ensuring the audience trusts the words being spoken. Intimacy, on the other hand, bridges the gap between the speaker and listener, making the experience feel personal, as if the words were meant for them alone. A calm voice disarms resistance. It slows the pace of thought, giving the audience time to feel, not just hear. When someone speaks about a topic as private and complex as desire, a fast or forceful tone can feel invasive. Calm delivery tells the listener, you are safe here. You can explore this without judgment. It allows them to sink into the meaning of the words and reflect quietly on their own experiences. That's where transformation begins, not in loud persuasion, but in quiet realization. Confidence is equally vital. Without it, calmness becomes weakness. Confidence communicates that the speaker isn't merely speculating, they understand what they're saying. It's not about arrogance or dominance, but about grounded certainty, the kind that comes from knowing the truth of your message. When the audience senses that quiet power, they listen differently. They don't just process words, they absorb presence. Confidence gives weight to every pause, every silence, every carefully chosen word. Intimacy ties it all together. It's created through tone, pacing, and emotional transparency. An intimate delivery doesn't mean oversharing or dramatizing. It means speaking in a way that feels close, human, and genuine. It's the difference between a lecture and a conversation whispered in trust. When the delivery feels intimate, listeners don't feel lectured. They feel understood. They recognize themselves in the pauses, in the quiet reflections, in the vulnerability that the speaker allows to exist between words. When calmness, confidence, and intimacy intertwine, the message becomes magnetic. It doesn't demand attention, it earns it. The speech starts to feel like a shared secret rather than public instruction. The audience leans in, not because they are told to, but because they want to. They feel the truth of the message in the rhythm of the voice, in the stillness between sentences, and in the emotional honesty that carries every word. Inviting self-awareness means guiding the audience to look inward instead of outward. It's about turning the lens of understanding back onto themselves, encouraging them to question their own emotional responses and experiences. When speaking about what turns women on, self-awareness is the bridge between observation and empathy. Instead of focusing on external behaviors or surface-level traits, it invites people to explore the deeper emotional currents that drive attraction and connection. This shift changes the entire tone of the conversation. It's no longer about analyzing others, but about understanding how we show up, how we communicate, and how we make others feel. Self-awareness is the heart of emotional intelligence. It's what allows someone to notice not only what they're feeling, but how those feelings influence their behavior. When a speaker encourages the audience to question how connection is as felt, not just a scene, they open the door to emotional depth. They're saying, don't just look at what happens between people, feel what happens within you. That awareness helps listeners realize that attraction isn't a checklist or a formula. It's an emotional rhythm, one that is felt through tone, body language, and energy. This perspective helps break down misconceptions about desire. Many assume that attraction is about external factors, looks, money, charm, or confidence. But when the focus shifts to how a connection feels, it reveals a deeper truth that emotional safety, authenticity, and presence are what create real chemistry. Self-awareness helps a person recognize the energy they bring into every interaction. Are they grounded or anxious? Are they present or distracted? Are they genuinely listening or just waiting to respond? These subtle emotional states determine the kind of connection they build, whether it's fleeting or profound. A speech that invites self-awareness also allows vulnerability to emerge. It encourages listeners to be honest about what they truly desire and how they respond to intimacy and attraction. This isn't about judgment, it's about clarity. When people begin to see their own patterns, they develop compassion for themselves and for others. They begin to understand that the way we connect is often shaped by what we've experienced, what we've healed, and what we've yet to face. Through self-awareness, the audience learns that true connection doesn't start with trying to impress someone else. It starts with being in touch with one's own emotional landscape. It's about noticing the difference between performing attraction and embodying it. When a person becomes aware of how connection feels within them, they naturally become more authentic, and that authenticity is what draws others in without effort. Ending the introduction with a magnetic hook that teases a truth deeper than physical attraction is about leaving the listener suspended in curiosity, eager for what's coming next. It's that moment when the audience feels like they're standing on the edge of a revelation, sensing that something profound is about to unfold. The purpose of this final moment is to ignite anticipation, not by giving answers, but by pointing to a mystery that feels both emotional and universal. A great hook doesn't scream for attention, it whispers to the soul, pulling the audience inward with emotional gravity. When talking about female desire, a magnetic hook should shift the listener's perspective from the surface, the external, toward the unseen layers of connection. It makes them realize that attraction is not about appearances or performance, but about energy, emotion, and presence. The hook hints that something far deeper, something almost spiritual, defines what truly draws a woman in. It might sound like a paradox, a poetic truth, or a scientific revelation phrased in a way that makes people stop and reflect. The goal is to stir both intellect and emotion simultaneously, leaving a quiet ache of curiosity in the mind. This type of ending gives rhythm and direction to the speech. Every strong introduction begins by raising questions and closes by promising answers, not in the form of facts, but in the form of transformation. When the speaker leaves the audience hanging in that emotional tension, they create engagement that feels personal. The listener doesn't just want to know what happens next. They want to understand why they feel something stirring within them. That emotional pull is what makes a message unforgettable. The hook must also carry a sense of calm confidence. It shouldn't try to shock or manipulate the audience. Instead, it should feel like a quiet unveiling, a moment where the speaker's tone softens, the pauses lengthen, and the truth begins to shimmer beneath the words. The listener senses that they're about to learn something about desire, but also something about themselves. It's not just information, it's introspection. By teasing a truth deeper than physical attraction, the speaker transcends the ordinary conversation about what turns women on. It becomes less about seduction and more about understanding, about emotional resonance, psychological safety, and the invisible magnetism of presence. The audience is left not only intrigued but awakened, ready to follow the journey from curiosity to clarity, from fascination to insight.